Welcome back. Now, the latest polls, President Biden's approval rating is sinking to an all-time new low. A new Monmouth poll just out says 34% of voters approve of the job Biden is doing as president, while a full 61% said that they disapprove. Vice President Kamala Harris's approval rating, meanwhile, inching above Biden's for the first time. She's at 35%. He's at 34%. This, as a new report reveals, President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden are frustrated by Joe's dismal poll numbers. The Washington Post is reporting that he gathered his closest aides before Thanksgiving and delivered some stern words for the small group assembled. His poll numbers were unacceptably low, and he wanted to know what his team and his campaign were doing about it, quote unquote. Joining me right now is former House Speaker, former Georgia Congressman, and Fox News contributor, the author of the latest March to the Majority, Newt Gingrich, is here. Newt, it's always a pleasure. Speaker, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Give us your reaction to these sinking poll numbers.
Good to be with you. Well, they're based on reality. We just got a poll back at the America's New Majority Project. 76% of the country wants us to deal with the crisis at the border. 76%.
Wow, 76.
That means Democrats, Republicans, Independents. Guess who's stopping it? It's Biden's immigration policy, Biden's illegal immigrants. You go to New York, where a 94-year-old Korean War veteran gets kicked out of his assisted living in order to turn it over to one of Biden's illegal immigrants. Wow. You look at the crime rate. Washington had its 900th carjacking on Thanksgiving Day. Every time you turn around, there's something that's just totally screwed up. And then you look at foreign policy. We've had over 100 attacks on American forces in the Middle East, and this administration is pathetic. You just covered earlier, and I listened very carefully, the whole problem with the Houthis. And that's entirely a problem of international navigation. And normally the U.S. Navy would put them down and protect the right of shipping. With this administration, you get nothing. So I think what you're seeing is, frankly, a nice old guy who's totally out of touch with reality, who blames everybody else, when the real problem is we are rejecting his ideology, his values, and his policies because of what they do to us, because of what they do to the cost of living, to what they do to us in terms of safety, and I think that's going to continue.
Yeah, but why? I mean, I don't understand why he would ignore the wide open border. I don't understand why he would push this climate change agenda, knowing that it is hurting people who need oil and fossil fuels to run their businesses. And then you've got the economic story. New Fox News poll says more voters feel like they've been hurt by Bidenomics rather than helped by it. 14% said that Biden's economic policies have helped versus 46% who say they've actually hurt them. Right. Nearly 80% of voters say that the economy is in bad shape.
Look, there's a classic example of where Biden doesn't understand anything about what Ronald Reagan did brilliantly and what Donald Trump does brilliantly. Why would you, when you know that you're getting those kind of numbers, why would you call it Bidenomics? He went around and made sure that we all understood this terrible economy is Joe Biden's economy. And then he wonders what's happening to his poll numbers. I think what you have is the hard left is essentially a religious movement. They believe in fantasies. I did a piece recently arguing that John Kerry is crazy, and I use that term, crazy in the sense that he's out of touch with reality. You're seeing car dealers, I think 1,200 of them wrote the president and said, we can't sell the electric vehicles. And now you have an effort to mandate that you must buy it even if you don't want it. It's very hard to tell the American people to do things they don't want to do. A free people don't have to do things they don't want to do, and that's one of the core problems that Biden is facing.
Yeah, great points all around. We've got, meanwhile, a picture of President Trump soaring. A new Fox News poll shows former President Trump is dominating among so many groups, including young voters. He's got a 13-point lead on Joe Biden with voters under 30 years old. 41% of those voters say that they would vote for Trump in the general election. 28% they would vote for Biden. Newt, I mean, at this moment in time, 300 or so days before the next election, what do you make of these polls that have Trump dominating the field? I know Nikki Haley has been able to cut into some of that, but is she going to be able to take it from Trump?
Oh, no. I mean, first of all, she hasn't been able to cut into Trump at all. She's been able to cut into DeSantis.
Right. Good point. Yes,
essentially, what you have, Donald Trump's going to be the nominee. I don't see any way, and I saw Karl Rove the other day say he didn't believe it was possible to be this far ahead and lose the nomination. I think that's probably right. But here's what Trump has going for him that's amazing. People look back and they say overwhelmingly his policies were better for them than Biden. They look forward, and he's beginning to offer a very visionary future. I loved the speech he gave both in New Hampshire and in Nevada over the weekend, where he talked about saving America's cities. He talked about working with the Democrats. In fact, I just did a newsletter about how important I think it was to have a Republican embrace the cities and decide that saving America's cities really matters. Of course, Trump grew up in Queens, lived in Manhattan. He gets it. And I think that having him in a positive way talk about saving the cities is going to appeal to a lot of Democrats who are, again, you have Mayor Adams at 23% approval. Well, that says to me there's a potential market in New York City for Donald Trump.
Yeah, but Newt, what about these legal issues, okay? Can anybody really tell us what's going to happen here? You got Jack Smith working overtime to put Trump on the stand on trial on March 4th.
Look, there's an entire wing of the Democratic Party that would like us to become Venezuela. You have a radical judge who openly hates Trump in charge of a trial in the District of Columbia where Trump got 5% of the vote. Now, does anybody seriously believe that he can get a fair trial in the District of Columbia? You have a rabid prosecutor who's doing everything he can to try to put Trump in jail. This doesn't look like the pursuit of justice. This is the replacement of the rule of law with the rule of power, and the American people know it. And I think when they get to really look at this trial and they get to look at how radical this judge is, Trump's just going to get stronger. He's not going to get weaker.
Yeah. Lee Carter, jump in.
So one of my questions, when you look at the polling on every single measure, Republicans are doing better. You look economy, immigration, every one of the top issues. And yet there's a lot of people out there who say that abortion is the one issue that could really cause Republicans a challenge. And it's not necessarily just because of its abortion. It's because there's this idea that Republicans aren't pro-women. They don't have a pro-women agenda. How would you advise Republicans right now to win back that woman, the suburban woman vote who might be considering just voting on this one issue?
Well, I mean, first of all, if you look at the polling numbers, I think women recognize even more than men that in terms of the cost of health care, and women are the primary purchasers of health care, that Trump is better than Biden. In terms of the economy, Trump is better than Biden. In terms of crime, Trump is better than Biden. In terms of illegal immigration, Trump is better than Biden. There's a point there when they say, okay, let's agree that we're going to disagree about this one item. I mean, Trump is not a hard line, stop you from having an option, but he does believe that there are certain limits. And I think most Americans agree that there's some limit, that killing a baby in the 9th month is wrong. Right. And so you can work your way back. You can have a reasonable conversation. But Trump will turn out to be much more favorable to women than Joe Biden is.
Well, what gets me, Newt, is that the Democrats and the media, as a result, will not even look at what we're talking about every day with regard to Joe Biden. So here you have Trump in one quarter with policies that have actually been really good, positive for America. And then you've got Joe Biden here in the other corner where we're hearing news from the Oversight Committee of millions of dollars that he and his family has taken in. I mean, Jamie Comer using words like money laundering, bribery, tax evasion, and you don't see a peep about it on the news.
Look, let me show you how biased the news is. But let me show you how biased the general news media is. Melania Trump, herself a first-generation legal immigrant, goes to a naturalization ceremony last week and leads the national naturalization ceremony. Now, did that make ABC, NBC, CBS, the New York Times, the Washington Post? Of course not. It was a positive gesture on behalf of legal immigration by a beautiful woman who herself is a legal immigrant.
Right.
And I think the Trump team is very concerned to draw a distinction between legal immigration, which they favor, and illegal immigration, which they oppose. Right. Not a word.
Not a word.
I mean, if she were a liberal Democrat, she'd be Jackie Kennedy.
Yeah, and she's a former first lady. Not a word. Newt, always a pleasure. It's great to see you. Thanks very much for your incredible insights, as always. Newt Gingrich joining us. Merry Christmas, Newt.
Thank you.